The land, the facilities required, an adequate taxation regime. It's never going to be so easy. At the end of the day, between 6 to 8% growth and 8 to 10% growth, what is the difference? One difference is, of course, in a globally adverse circumstances, it becomes difficult. But that's an external factor. The external instability is a factor. But the horse that if we make some discounts for that and factor that in, domestically, quicker permissions. In trade decisions, it is expected and anticipated, and that's the global calculation, that 14% addition to costs can take place because of trade facilitation. So between an exporter in another country and an exporter in India, from manufacturing till it departs from the seaport, the entire process of infrastructure and facilitation can add to costs by 14%. And if your product is going to be 14% costlier than the other man's product, then the hard reality is that consumers like buying cheaper products. They don't consciously buy costlier products. You're going to miss the bus. And therefore, in every process, whether it's economic or even if it is a process which is, as I said, relevant to local livings. I gave the example of municipalities or taxation. Let's take the example of courts. Courts in India have a broad approach where they would like to stricture governments for not complying with taking decisions expeditiously. But then wherever time limits are set for courts to take a decision, every judgment has said this is directory and not mandatory. So when I was the law minister, I amended the Civil Procedure Code and said this must be done in 60 days, this must be done in 30 days. So the whole parliamentary verdict was frustrated by a Supreme Court judgment which said, well, these dates that the parliament has told us to do it in are all directory and not mandatory. For good reasons, we can violate this time schedule. And that's why the result of this is that every international investment in India is written loud and clear, no jurisdiction of Indian courts. It will be an arbitration in some foreign soil under a substantive law and a procedural law which belongs to some other country. So international investors start with a statement of no confidence because of the pace of Indian courts. So the courts will also have to realize this. Now I can't understand. We've now sanctioned a lot of money for making courts technology compliant, and therefore slowly but surely most of the pleadings, etc., all those procedural dates have to get on to be eliminated, and this can only be done on the net itself. I think there are many other areas, and I refer to 2 or 3 of them. One is a very powerful interface of government, which is the police. And I think it is here that the largest reform is required in India. If there's a single largest reform required, it's in a police-citizen relationship. And no amount of discussion on citizen-centric reforms would be complete till that becomes a civilized relationship. There are many countries in the world, it's become a very civilized relationship. You can't have a society where people are scared and reluctant to deal with the police. They are reluctant to file a complaint. They are reluctant to seek assistance from a police. Ladies would be advised not to visit the police station. You can't have a system in which, and therefore the police training, their attitude towards the citizen. The Bobby in England is always considered a friend. If you lose your way and you want to ask him, he's your best friend who will tell you where to go and where not to go. Elsewhere, the systems of dealing with the public are so civilized. I remember several years ago, more than 1.5 decades or maybe more than that, with my family, I entered Switzerland through air. And at the airport, I decided to take, they have lovely trains, to buy ticket to go to the destination we were staying. So the lady at the counter asked me, "Are you here for a vacation?" I said, "Yes." "How many are you?" I said, "We are 4 of us." "How many children?" 2. "How long are you here?" I said, "For a week." "And are you going to go around the state, the country?" I said, "Yes." She says, "This ticket will cost you so much to this destination. But if you took a 1-week family pass from me, by just paying a little 20-30% more, you can have travel throughout the state." So every tourist was this was my first interface with the system there. And immediately this is the comfort that you provide to your tourist. I think police, tourism, these are all areas, banking, where this kind of a facilitation has to increase. Distribution of government largesse. I recollect an incident in 1977 when the government at first changed, and the state governments also changed. One of the most powerful departments in the state governments used to be the Department of Civil Supplies. And in Delhi, we had a very powerful politician belonging to my party. He was looking after civil supplies. So I once went in the morning to meet him, and I saw about 500 people standing outside his house. And one by one, each one would come with a piece of paper and he would write something on it and put a circle. Now we were in an era of cement shortage. So you have to go to the minister for cement shortage. So I want to repair my house, I want to build my house. So I need 25 bags. He would say, "All right, take 5. He would put a 5 and put a circle around it. So I said, "Why do you do this yourself?" He said, "Can you see how many people I am mobilizing every day?" That's the regime. Now, according to me, one of the most disastrous programs in India, which was at that time hailed as almost the 19th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, was that infamous 20-point program of the emergency. One of the laws we brought was the Urban Land Ceiling Act. Urban Land Ceiling Act was that nobody should own urban land more than 500 meters in a big town and a little more in other towns. So what happened was that people who had generated a lot of urban land, so that you could start real estate constructions, you could have multi-story buildings coming up in India, people from villages, suburban centers coming up, as is happening now. So the moment you had that land would be confiscated. So it became the biggest instrument of corruption all over the country. Then we put a provision in that act, it used to be called Section 20, that the minister in charge will have the power to give exemptions. So we concentrated power, we stopped construction all over the country, we concentrated the land, the government hardly got any land under that act, but India's real estate industry went back by 20 years. So what started in the 90s, this creation of suburban townships and urban townships coming up, should have actually started at that time. And everybody who came within the scope of that act, you had, I think you people must have just joined service around that time. So the ministers used to grant the Section 20 exemptions under that act. So nothing was done except putting India's urbanization back by 2 decades. That act only achieved one purpose. So finally, in the year about 2000, when Mr. Vajpayee became the Prime Minister, we decided to repeal it. But because it was a state act, there is a provision in the Constitution that on a state subject, the centre can legislate with the authority of 2 of the states, and then the other states can adopt it. So I am told some of the states till last year had still not fully withdrawn it. So each state had to pass a resolution withdrawing it. Fortunately, now I think most of the states have withdrawn that act. Now these are areas where we have to make sure that both in policy and in practice, governance is not used for the purposes of being so intrusive, being so regulatory, making life so complicated that people keep running around the government. So that whole balancing act between how much should state regulate, how much does the state want to know, I think is a great balancing act. There is a process of withdrawal of the state from a large number of these areas which is on, and therefore that is the whole concept of minimizing the interference of the state and allowing the citizenry to continue. Land records, I'm not going to all those examples because you must have gone through them, is yet another example of this. But I'm quite certain that if the Department of Personnel can initiate a changed ethos in India, we'll become a much happier place to live in for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister Shri Arun Jaitley, for your noteworthy and engaging address, and also